I didn't know what kind of journalist I would be. I thought maybe I'd be working a beat, at a local publication, or the instructors are almost all journalists themselves. They've done sort of this, they've worked in newsrooms much of their lives. It's not a lot of writing teaching, I would say. They do a little bit, but a lot of reporting, because that's a skill you don't learn. You don't learn how to report. You learn how to write in college, in English class. Of course, journalistic writing is different. The way I learned it was very matter of fact, very, using as few words as possible to convey ideas and facts, but also writing in an engaging way.
You've just heard Coco Ballantyne, a New York-based journalist and science writer who is also a co-author on the Scientific American Psychology textbook. I had the privilege of chatting with Coco for this 217th episode of Psych Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. Would it benefit you and your students to know about the latest in clinical and educational assessments? Well, we are proud to partner with Multi Health Systems, MHS, who has been a trusted name in psychological assessment for over 40 years, delivering science-backed solutions for clinical psych, education, and more. They develop tools for assessing disorders like ADHD, anxiety, depression, and autism, which are just the kinds of things that I talk about in my disorders course. So whether your students are just learning about assessment in the classroom or whether they are psych majors who may well be administering such tests someday, keeping up with the latest developments will help you connect your course content and your students to the real world. You can stay on top of what's going on in psychological measurement. Pause this episode and then head to mhs.com/email division to sign up for their clinical and educational newsletter. We want to thank MHS for this valuable resource. Psych Sessions is sponsored by W.W. Norton. Are you looking for more activities to promote scientific literacy? ZAPS 3.0 interactive labs from W.W. Norton are brief, hands-on activities that invite students to actively participate in the process of psychological research and discovery. Utilizing a consistent 5-part framework and incorporating transparent design principles, students experience classic psychological studies like the Stroop effect, false memory, the serial position effect, signal detection, and more. Once they've completed the experiment, students can compare their data with national data and their own classmates, offering the opportunity for rich in-class or online discussions. Bring the science of psychology to life for your students with ZAPS. For Psych Sessions listeners new to ZAPS, you can try it for free the next time you teach. Just go to siegel.wwnorton.com/Psych Sessions, and the folks at WW Norton will even integrate it into your LMS for you. That is Siegel, like the bird, SEAGULL.wwnorton.com/Psych Sessions.
Hi, my name is Vishal Thakkar, and I am currently an assistant professor at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. I am excited to be a member of SDP since SDP offers a place where I feel like I belong and I am always welcome. There are tons of opportunities like task forces, small groups, and the annual Conference on Teaching, or ACT, to meet new friends, reunite with old ones, learn something new each step of the way, and learn more about the impact and importance of being a teacher of psychology. I encourage everyone to visit teachpsych.org and join SDP as a member today.
Hey folks, welcome back to the podcast. I am here today with Coco Ballantyne, who is a New York-based journalist and science writer. And Coco, I got to tell you, well, first, welcome. And then I have to share with you that generally we have teachers of psychology. Now, you are a former teacher and you write for psychology. So I think you somehow fit the box for us.
Yes, I hope so.
Well, welcome, and
Thank you.
thanks for doing this. I'm actually really excited to talk to you because I don't know where I have some sort of warm association with Scientific American. I think I've used it in my classes for a long time. I'm talking about the organization. So
Yes.
I'll have you tell me more about that. But first of all, let's just start here. Can you tell me right out of the gate what you are working on with your co-authors, what you've been involved with for the last number of years?
So we've been working together for probably almost 15 years now, which is a long time. When I met Misty and Deb, I was working at Scientific American, and I was interested in, trying a different type of project. And so I met someone at Scientific American who knew the managing editor or someone in the editorial department at Worth, and I connected with them that way. And so we started the project 15 years ago, and our first edition came out maybe 5 years after we began that project, and we've pushed out. We're on our fourth edition now, so we've been together and perfecting our process for about a decade now, over a decade together. And the whole idea, I guess there's sort of there are many sort of themes with our textbook, but one of the main themes is trying to make psychology relevant to students' lives and truly engaging through the use of real life experiences. So I'm sure, when you were in school, like if you think back to what you actually remember from your classes, it's likely to be somehow connected to your everyday experience or to someone else's life, not just, the square root of 4 is 2 because it's 2. That's not a very good example. It's not a good example, a math example, but or just thinking something like algebra, if you have a problem relating to something, like I want to buy a certain number of shirts and a certain number of pants, and they cost this much, and how I have $30 or not $30, more like $300. How am I going to use that to get the maximum number of shirts and pants? That's a real life example. It actually is something that makes sense. That makes sense. It's not just an abstraction. So we try to do that with psychology, relate the brain to the experience of a Marine who came back and lost 1/3 of his brain tissue, or a person who has, the concepts of memory. We take the concepts of memory and we relate them to a person who has this rare ability to remember every day of her life in explicit detail. So, but then also we incorporate the stories of everyday people, kind of ordinary, quote unquote, people. Sure. So the whole idea that we've been working toward is trying to make this relevant to students, not just, another class where they read a textbook and it's just it's just so boring, and it's not, why am I learning this? And
yeah, well, it sounds like relevant, but also interesting. Like I poked around on those kind of, I don't know if you call them case studies or what, on the website, and it's really neat. So you do have these exceptional cases, and like I'm teaching a biopsych course right now, and those exceptional cases are, how you make biopsych interesting, right? And so those exist in psychology, but I hear that you're saying like you guys present these exceptional cases, but also these everyday applications for students. So as an instructor, I love that, because most of my students are going to struggle to read. So anything we can do to keep them like engaged is a really good thing, right?
Yeah. And I just think that in our world today, everybody is so, the environment's very polarized. And the only way we can sort of relate to each other is by understanding each other's stories. And that's how you develop empathy, is like, understanding someone's story, really trying to understand what it's like to be them. And it just makes things so much more memorable to understand the world of somebody who might be, for example, in the psychological disorders chapter, what is it like to have bipolar disorder? What does it feel like? And get inside that person's mind. And that person, in our psychological disorders chapter, that would be an example of sort of more of an ordinary story. A person, the statistics are, that depends on what study you look at, but, 1 in every 4 people at any given time meets the criteria for a mental disorder, I think, according to some research I've looked at. But, you probably know a little bit more about that, being an expert in the field. But, that's an ordinary, not an ordinary experience, but that is a more common experience. Whereas somebody who lost a third of their brain in battle, that's an extraordinary experience. That's something that very few people have come back from.
How many of those sorts of applications or cases do you present in the book? Is it like one per chapter? Is it multiple? Just roughly.
Typically, it's 1 per chapter or 2 per chapter.
Yes,
usually 1, or usually 1 to 2. I would say, depending on if it's 2 stories, they tend to be a little bit shorter. If it's 1 story, it's really it's very in depth. So
yeah. I'm always interested in like introductory psychology books because there's so many out there, right? I'm always interested in like what is the unique thing that an author team brings to it. And there are some interesting cases out there of like of just like, I don't know, I'm going to say interesting again, but interesting teams of people who come together. And so, yours is a little unique, right? So as a science writer, why did you think that like, or who had this idea that this could actually work, that you could merge with teachers of psychology who became authors and that you all together could create something different? So I guess there's 2 questions in there. The first one is, are the case studies and the applications, is that kind of the unique thing about this book? And then secondly, the more historical, like how did you all dream this up? And those might be related.
Whether you're a passionate psychology enthusiast or a dedicated college professor, we know that every student is unique, and so should be their learning journey. That's why we're thrilled to introduce you to Macmillan Learning's Achieve platform. Imagine a space where learning is as dynamic as the students themselves. Achieve offers a personalized experience with interactive ebooks and collaborative class management tools designed to meet each student's needs. But that's not all. Immerse yourself in our multimedia study tools and explore over 100 new videos, each crafted to spark curiosity and deepen understanding. For those who believe in empowering students with essential skills, Achieve has exclusive skill activities to help them master note-taking and APA-style usage. It's more than just learning. It's about preparing students for success in the real world. Innovation in education is at the heart of what we do. So why not be a part of this journey? Discover how you can inspire and transform learning experiences by visiting macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions. Together with Macmillan Learning, let's inspire what's possible for every learner. Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.
The case studies are one sort of, that our book is, most people know our book because of the integrated stories, and they're different from other psychology textbooks in that they don't just appear on this first page and then sort of disappear or fade out. We do revisit them throughout the chapter at times that it's relevant or it makes the most sense to reintroduce them. So a topic comes up and the story relates to the topic. So that is unique. It's not the only thing I would say is unique about our textbook. We have Deb and Misty are the most incredible teachers. And throughout the time I've known them, they've always had one priority, and that is the student. Like they want to make this easy for the student. They worry about student learning. They care so much about their students. They care about, of course, they care about the instructors and experience as well, but they see students in the classroom that struggle with reading and that have a lot going on in their lives outside of school. They're juggling parenthood or they're juggling multiple jobs. And they really just care about making this easy for the student and challenging the student, not making it, easy in that it's not challenging, but sort of working for those students. They're always working for those students. So they bring that to the project. And for example, we have teaching tools that they innovated. For example, the connections is a unique, there are cross references in other books, but we have these cross references that actually summarize the whole concept connection for the student. So instead of the student having, okay, so like, here's an example, like, I'm just going to throw one out. I'm not even sure if we have any connections on this, but let's say procedural memory comes up in a non-memory chapter, or implicit memory. It comes up in a chapter that's not about memory. Then we'll not only reference the chapter on memory, but we will explain why this concept relates to the concept and sort of summarize that concept that we're referring to. So the student doesn't have to do all that work. It's like what Misty and Deb would do in the classroom. So they would be talking about, suppose they're talking about explicit memory, and they would say to their students, remember, in the memory chapter, we learned about explicit memory, and then they might summarize what that is and quickly relate it to the topic at hand. So that's what the connections do. So there's an example of Misty and Deb's incredible teaching style making this book unique. And there are other ways in which the book does that as well.
I like that. I like the explanation of writing it like you would be presenting it in a classroom, because one of the problems with introductory psychology textbooks is that they are so segmented, right? They can exist, like these chapters can just exist apart from each other. It's one of the challenges is trying to find how that content kind of can integrate and give like a holistic understanding of what psychology is. And so if somebody, I was just reviewing a paper this morning on intro psych, and this person, rightfully said that if you are just teaching a typical textbook, you are going to just go through it chapter by chapter by chapter. And if you're not a skilled instructor or skilled at the discipline, you're not going to understand how those things, how to make that come alive across chapters. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you're, I like a good callback in comedy and in also in textbook writing. So that's great. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so those are some of the unique things now. But I'm really interested in you as kind of the science writer person of this group and how that came together. So definitely some unique things about your textbook. So let's go back to, like, I don't know how far we want to go back. Do you mind if we get into your backstory a little bit, and then we can kind of follow the trail right back to where we are right now?
Sure.
So like where did you grow up, and where did you, I don't know, let's just talk about you as a student. What were you interested in?
I was like a big nerd for sure. I grew up in Wisconsin, where people are really friendly and genuine and nice. And I had a good childhood, I would say. And I was a nerd in school.
And what city in Wisconsin? Because we do have
Madison.
some Wisconsinites. All right, good. Madison. Yeah.
Madison. Great place. I went to, for my undergrad, I went to Stanford, and I loved it there. I loved the whole California vibe. There's an openness about California and connection with the natural environment. I studied pre-med, but then I realized I don't want to be in a hospital all day. I love the subject matter. I was fascinated by biochemistry and physiology, but I didn't really feel like that was, I think I'm a little bit more of a creative person than analytical. I try to be analytical, but I love the creative, exploring the creative aspects of the mind. So
did you know that?
Medical school. Yeah.
So, sorry, there's a little delay, so I think I stepped on you there. But did you know that when you like grew up in Madison, did you have like creative interests as well as academic? Because you said nerd, and so I think what I heard was a kind of academic interests, and that you did pretty well at school. But were there also those creative hints as well during that time?
Yeah, I think as like a young child, I was always like having imaginary characters I made up and writing plays and organizing dance events in my basement. Like, I was always really interested in art, and I think I did drama. So I guess that was always there, but definitely an academic nerd for sure.
Did Did you, because I know like the University of Wisconsin's there, right? Did your folks work at the university, or what did they do?
My dad taught at the medical school, and my mom, my parents were divorced. So my stepmom stayed at home. My dad was a cardiologist. He taught at the medical school. My mom worked in business. And so we all lived really close to each other. That was
interesting.
fun.
And so, well, there's the pre-med piece. You probably kind of got a little bit of guidance, right?
Yeah, because I worship my dad. He's the nicest person in the world. He was always inviting patients over, talking to them. They'd call at any time of day. He still does. He's 81 now, and he still has patients calling him all the time. He goes into the hospital at night. I mean, he's the most amazing person in the world. I've never met anyone who's even close. He's just such a good person.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Well, that, those things form us, don't they? And observing those things. And so can I just ask, how did you decide on Stanford? And, and maybe let's just even go back, because I think like I'm at a community college. So I get a lot of high school students who are maybe 16, who are in a program where they can take maybe a community college class or something like that. But as a teenager, did you know that you were like, I'm pre-med, I know that I want to do that? Or when did you decide on that?
Gosh, it's hard to know. Like, I feel like as a teenager, you do things maybe unconsciously, and you're not even aware what's driving you. I think I was sort of just a overachiever, and I wasn't that smart. I just would work harder than anybody else. So and also when I was growing up, you probably of my generation, like it was easier to get into those schools. Now it's like, I don't think I would get into any school now. So I would get into college. So
oh man, yes.
I think, I don't know. It's like, I think, who knows why? I think it's, you're kind of just driven by these unconscious forces. I think unless some teenagers are very self-aware. I probably was not one of them.
Well, I wasn't either. And it's nice that you put it as like unconscious forces. I would put it for myself as just being totally naive about everything. Right. But it sounds like you also had maybe some guidance from parents about how this college thing works, and that you do apply for these things. And, that's where maybe your story is a little different than mine, is because as a first generation college student, I didn't even know how those things worked. And so, it's like pure naivete. Right. But do you remember like applying for colleges and did you apply for a bunch of them and then decide on Stanford?
I was like, I applied to 4 colleges.
Okay.
And the fact that you're first generation, Deb and Misty have so many first generation students, and they're also always thinking about those students and what their experience is like. They're so aware of that unique experience.
Yeah. I think good teachers kind of, find their way to really care for those kinds of students, right?
They really do.
Yeah. And so that's that's cool to hear. And I bet you it changes the way you write a textbook to your students, right? Thinking about those, how those maybe underprepared or underrepresented populations are going to interact with your book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So like an example of them sort of understanding that is, I would, as the writer who's not in the classroom, I would be suggesting, why don't we write this? And they would say, I don't think students are thinking about that every day. They're thinking about the bills on the kitchen table. They're thinking about getting their kid to daycare. They're thinking about, taking care of their elderly parents or their sick parents, or juggling multiple jobs. So they would always be thinking about that. So it's been a really great learning experience working with them.
Yeah. And I mean, you would have seen some of, well, actually, I'm going to pop forward for a bit. You taught for a while, right?
Yes. I taught at a really cool school. It's called Eastside College Prep in East Palo Alto, which is across the bridge from Palo Alto. So East Palo Alto, before Eastside, the school that I taught at, it's a privately funded school. I think it still is privately funded. It's not a charter school. It's not a public school. So before Eastside existed in East Palo Alto, all the East Palo Alto children were being bused to other communities outside of their community to school. And it's possible that there was one other school, but a lot of these kids were being bussed out. And so this amazing man and woman who are Stanford graduates started Eastside. It started out with like 8 kids in trailers. I got there probably like the 3rd or 4th year. The school was in maybe the 3rd year or 4th year. Which one? The seniors. Anyway, doesn't matter. I got there early. And we were literally teaching in trailers. There were mice running across the floor every once in a while. And it was just like, I was teaching physics, which I had taken physics in college, but, I wasn't like a physics major. So, and I kind of, working with the vice principal, like put together a curriculum, and the kids were incredible. I still keep in touch with some of them. I mean, it was just the most amazing experience. I love them. I love them so much. So I taught there for 4 years. I taught math and physics.
There it is. Well, we can sniff out the heart of a teacher, anywhere. Those of us who love to teach and love students. So that's really cool. Okay. So now I'm going to jump back. I'm going to say, so you're at Stanford and you are kind of aiming for pre-med, but at some point something shifts for you. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually I almost get emotional talking about it. The kids, like I started with this one freshman class and I wanted to see them graduate. And so I got into medical school and I didn't go because I was like, I want to stay with you guys until you graduate. And so I get like emotional thinking about it now. And so I stayed with them those 4 years and then I left at the same time they did. And they're doing well. They're all doing great. So you
had started with them as freshmen.
Yeah.
And then you brought them through.
Yeah. And I went to their reunion, their 20-year reunion, like 2 years ago. And I remember just talking to them and I'm like, they're all smarter than I am now. This is what you want as a teacher, to be like, I feel like a dummy talking to these kids.
Amazing. Yeah. And so did you teach physics or did you teach other subjects as well?
Physics, algebra, and geometry.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And okay. And did you have to have a teaching certification at that point in time to do that school? Okay.
It's private. So I just went I taught 1 year at Stanford as a TA for human biology. That was sort of in between college and my teaching high school. And I did have some teaching experience, but not much. So they hired me and I was lucky to get hired. So
what did you graduate with at Stanford?
I majored in human biology and minored in Spanish.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting. What was that conversation like with your folks when you were like, yeah, I'm not going to go to medical school. I'm going to keep teaching these kids?
They were like totally fine with it.
Good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a cool response. Yeah. All right. So then you bring these kids through, or you join them on their journey towards being graduating seniors. And then you knew you were done there at that point?
Yeah, I think I felt like the type of teacher that I felt like it was unsustainable. Like the amount that I was invested. I was going in on the weekends to tutor and like, I don't know. I was so emotionally invested. I felt like I couldn't do it and like have a family and stuff because I was so emotionally invested. I don't know how teachers like you guys do it and maintain balance, because I felt like these are all these lives that you're working with these kids, and what you do could help them potentially change the course of their life if they can get through this class and feel good about it. I don't know. I felt so anyway. I don't know. The reason I left is I felt like it was I just needed to do something else, I think.
Yeah.
That's not a very clear explanation.
Well, no, that's fine. It's interesting. I come out of the therapy world. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And so one of the things that they just drilled into us, I was at a really good program. You don't know that you're in a good program until I think because like my whole educational experience was very naive. So it wasn't until probably 10 years later that I was talking with another therapist, and I was like starting to have this realization that my program was really good. So one of the things that I talked about a lot was boundaries, right? Just in ethics and training us in that, and just really good teachers as well. But, when I transitioned into teaching instead of doing therapy, I brought those boundaries with me, probably too much. So then I got, a decade into teaching, and I realized, hey, there's a lack of care here for my students. And so, I had to navigate that. But, it takes some time, I think, in a job. And I'm still experiencing this now in academia. There takes some time before you feel like you have, I don't know, enough reps at something where your 10,000 hours, whatever that is, where you can start to explore and play with things and maybe break some rules. And so, yeah, no, I think that what you're describing is probably something that a lot of people feel. And I wonder if a lot of it is related to burnout too.
Yeah.
Just can I be so emotionally invested in my students where, where it's affecting me? How long can I do that for? Even though it's a great thing, how long can I do that for before it's going to take a toll? So, yeah.
So there are teachers there that are still there, it's 20 years later. So they must have figured out sort of a balance.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also been I think it's interesting that you had it. You kind of came into teaching with those boundaries so set, and then pulled them back a little bit. That's interesting. It's very self-aware too, because maybe some people wouldn't even think about that.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I started reading. He's a Bay Area guy too. His name is Irvin Yalom. He wrote the book on group therapy, actually, back in the whenever 70s or something like that, maybe 80s. I don't know. It's behind me here somewhere. Anyway, but he wrote a lot. He wrote this wonderful book. If people have never read this book, and you are even if you're not a therapist, I think you should read this book. It's called The Gift of Therapy. And it's a letter to young therapists. So, but I think it would be interesting to anybody. But it's maybe 100 little snippets of his reflections. And when I read that, probably, I don't know, 7 years ago, I think I'd picked it up in grad school, but then I reread it, and it was so different now because I realized that what he was doing was breaking all the rules. So you hear, or you learn that there is a way to do things, and this is how you keep yourself safe and your clients safe, or in the context that we're talking about, the way you teach and the way you keep your students safe, or whatever it is. There are these rules, and the rules are good. And then you become proficient, and then it's okay to break the rules at that point, because you kind of get it. So anyway, I'm having this realization as we're talking as well, that maybe this is something that people, deal with and or learn.
I think I actually just heard something yesterday about, Martha Graham, the famous dancer.
Yeah, I know the name. Yes.
So I love dance, and I teach dance, and have in addition to writing, and I follow dance. And Martha Graham was this incredible pioneer in dance, and she was saying, you don't sort of deviate until first you learn the rules, first you learn how it's done, that's sort of the traditional way, then you get the freedom. You don't, she had this beautiful quote. I can't remember exactly what it was, but you only sort of depart when you don't, I wish I could get it. Maybe I can send it to you afterwards. It was really smart.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more. I have been playing music for a long time, and I just know that it's true. There's a time of where you develop enough skill. And actually, we can see this, I think, in brain imaging. When people are acquiring a new skill, the brain's going crazy, right? It's just trying to figure it out. It's hard. And then as you do it, it becomes more automatic. And people can be doing dance, very complex things, and the brain is just sort of chilled out once you get so many reps under your belt, right? It knows what to do. And so at that point, now you can explore in new ways, with a new freedom.
Exactly. Once you've got that sort of baseline.
That's right.
beat or whatever you're working with. If you're playing music, you've got sort of those chords that you've got and you've played them 1,000 times, then you can start experimenting and trying things that are different.
I remember talking to a musician once who was far more advanced, and I'm not a great musician, but I talked to this guitar player, and he was like, all right, now you go to the 5 chord and then you go to the 6 chord. You can hear this right here. It goes to the 1. And he was telling me this, and we're listening to a song together. I'm like, how do you know that? Like that, how do you understand where this is going or what it is when it goes there? And then it was like, I'd already played music for a long time, but it was a couple of years later where all of a sudden I had that skill to do it.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's pop back into, you are at, you kind of finished that job up. Mm-hmm. And what was next for you? Like, was it like, I'm going to do more school, I'm going to go apply for different jobs?
So, well, this is totally irrelevant to the psychology textbook, so it probably doesn't have really a place in the podcast. But I'll just tell you because it's part of my journey. Yeah. I decided to pursue a dance career in Los Angeles. So I went for 3 years. I worked as a dancer and a tutor, and then I met my husband, and he was like, "Why don't you try journalism?" Because I was like, I don't want to dance forever. It's in the same way. Like, I kind of the way my brain works. I do sort of have done a lot of different things in my life, and I like to try different things. So after the dance, I was like, okay, I'm ready to start doing some hardcore academic stuff again. So my husband was like, "Why don't you start exploring journalism?" So I applied to journalism school, and he was in New York. And so I got into Columbia. And so I ended up there. And then I studied science. I knew I loved science. I did science writing there, science journalism, started working at Scientific American. So that's the...
So for an outsider, can you just tell us a little bit about journalism school? Like, who are the people who go there? What were you interested in learning there? What did you think was going to happen when you finished there? Because I just don't know that world at all.
Oh, gosh, I thought when I went there, I didn't know what kind of journalist I would be. I thought maybe I'd be working a beat, at a local publication, or the instructors are almost all journalists themselves. They've done sort of this, they've worked in newsrooms much of their lives. They teach you sort of, it's not a lot of writing teaching, I would say. They do a little bit, but a lot of reporting, because that's a skill you don't learn. You don't learn how to report. You learn how to write in college, in English class. Of course, journalistic writing is different. It's the way I learned it was, very matter of fact, very, using as few words as possible to convey ideas and facts, but also writing in an engaging way. One of my teachers in journalism school always said, "Paint me a movie," or no, "Write me a movie." She would say, "Write me a movie." So don't just tell me what happened. I want it to be like a movie that you write the image and include sensory details. And so, yeah, they teach you how to go out there and, observe things in the real world. You go out literally on the street, you go meet somebody at the housing department, you interview someone who's working for the city, the New York, I think I interviewed someone who's working. What did he do? He was working for one of the Congress people. I interviewed, local politicians. So things that I had never done before and didn't even know how to do. So they teach you how to report and then how to write a really engaging story. Science reporting is a little different, because then you start, I focused on science writing, and then they teach you, like in the same way that Misty and Deb teach their students how to read a scientific article, and here's the abstract, and these are the citations, and this is the statistical analysis. They teach you that if you're learning science reporting, and so I learned that. It was a great experience, and then I started working in that Scientific American, which was great. It was it's an incredible publication. I mean, it's one of the oldest and most respected scientific publications in the world. The people that I worked with were also intelligent, and just I admired all of them. I felt like a dummy working with all of them.
Were you aiming for it? Like when you finished your degree at Columbia, were you like, I'm going to aim for Scientific American?
Yes. Yeah. So I had interned there too. Okay. And I had interned at Nature Medicine also, which is a part of now Nature and Scientific American are part of the same company. So I aimed for Scientific American. I ended up there. And then not very long after I worked there, I connected with the person who had the Worth connection, and I found Misty and Deb. So actually I wasn't there very long, but it was a very good learning experience. And I really love what I've done with Misty and Deb. I feel so grateful that this has been my career. Honestly, it's been incredible.
Yeah. So how did that merger happen? Because, you had somebody who introduced you to the Worth Macmillan folks. But like, who had this idea that there could be like a hybrid? Yeah.
Yeah. Good question. Somebody at Worth, I think, must have been, because around the same time they were publishing a biology book or science book or some other discipline that used the same general approach of storytelling. So someone had this idea, some brilliant person. Maybe it was Misty and Deb. I need to ask them. I'm not even sure if it was Worth or Misty and Deb. But when I came on, they were like, this is what we want to do, and we need a journalist. So then I sort of tried out for the job, and Misty, Deb, and I worked on a learning chapter together. And then luckily they thought I was okay, and I got to work with them. So.
All right. So why did they feel like they needed or wanted a journalist? Do you know? Because lots of intro psych authors just go, like, I could just imagine, like, there are teams of people who write books together all the time, but they wanted a journalist. So here's what I'm going to ask. It might be a hard question. I'll put you on the spot a little bit. Like, what unique thing does a science writer bring to a psychology book? Like, what were the kind of the skills or the ways that you wrote about science that have contributed? And I know I'm asking you to kind of like tell me about how great you are right now. And
I'm definitely not great, but
and people great in your field. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that there's probably two main things. So you learn as a reporter, how to, and any person can do this, just like you don't have to be a lawyer to read laws. In the same way, any person can approach an organization and ask for an interview. But as a journalist, you're sort of comfortable doing that. You're trained to do that. That's what you know how to do. You know how to find people. You know how to reach out to people. You know how to interview people. These are things that you're trained to do. And so Misty and Deb have a psychological training, and they have that whole experience that I don't have. They know how to conduct a psychological assessment. I have no idea how to do that. Right. They know how to interpret studies that in a way that I don't know how. They have this huge global understanding of the field that I don't have. So what I brought was this ability, I think, or this training to report on report on people's lives. So interview people, and then write about them. And you also, I think that writing about people's stories is also sort of that is honed with a lot of training, I think. So these integrated stories, it helps to have a professional writer, because that's what they're trained to do, is to write stories and to write it in everyday language. So Scientific American, one of the great things that the journalists at Scientific American do is take scientific concepts and make them pretty accessible to a person without a science background. I'm sure a lot of scientists read Scientific American, but you could, as a non-scientist, look at one of those articles and be like, I can understand this. There's one story like this. They had this one funny article. It's called the Halle Berry neuron or something. And they made it so, understandable that there's a neuron in the brain that's specifically associated with Halle Berry. So I remember that was one of the cover stories. Yeah, that's brilliant. I admire those journalists.
Well,
so
now I feel like people listening are like, you need to go Google this right now.
Yeah,
That's
I'm like, I
interesting.
hope
And
I
what
got
a
the right.
hook.
Yeah. So I think that I couldn't do this without Misty and Deb, that they're huge, just this massive cognitive work that goes into understanding psychology and the field and what's going on in the field and where the research is and then the whole clinical side of it. So
yeah. So did you when you first worked on that learning chapter with them, what was your contribution to it? So you're coming in as this kind of outsider in some ways, but like, what did you bring to that chapter as you all wrote it?
Well, the first idea we had was to use Tiger Woods as an example for the learning, because we thought his life was so interesting. So I had this sort of, I think with the learning chapter, they might have already been working. They had already written at least one draft of a chapter. So I had sort of the draft, but then my job was to make it, take that content and then somehow connect it to Tiger Woods' story. So then at around that time that we were working on this, the whole scandal with Tiger Woods emerged with the golf clubs. And I don't remember the details of the scandal, but we've decided that maybe this wasn't the greatest person to feature because of the controversy. So then we switched our learning focus to Yvonne Mosquera-Schmidt, who's this amazing woman. So anyway, but my job was to take this chapter, which was already sort of written, and then kind of use the content and combine it with the story of Tiger Woods. So I got all these books on Tiger Woods. I researched his life. I was not able to get an interview with him. He's pretty difficult I contacted the publicist and I could not get the interview, but sometimes you can get interviews with people. I mean, there've been a few relatively famous people we've been able, like Cesar Millan, we were able to get.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. So, I mean, that is a skill that you have that the regular, academic does not have, is knowing how to get in touch with these people to even ask that information, right? Yeah. So, what I'm hearing is that there are like these two sides of you. We'll go back to how you described it, kind of this nerd sciencey side, and then this artistic side. It sounds like you have struck this really perfect balance for yourself of being able to tell stories and also do that and satisfy your own intellectual curiosity, and that and then it's interacting with like psychological science. It sounds like it's a perfect thing for you.
It's amazing. I mean, I feel so lucky that I get to, because as you know, the research in the field is always changing. I'm not an expert. I'm not a psychologist, but I get a lot of exposure to the research. So all these new things are happening all the time. And so you're always learning. Because just like, students are always learning new things. You get to be a student. And honestly, the stories, they tell themselves. I feel like as a journalist, my job is to tell the reader exactly what the person told me and try to do it in an organized way that makes sense. But that is not my creativity. That's not my genius. I don't have that genius that those people I interview have. It's their incredible stories and their ability to express their thoughts and relate their experiences that I'm just sort of like a medium, and I just listen to it, write it down, I record it, and then I put it out there. So
yeah. And you help integrate it with your co-authors into something that makes sense. Yeah.
And that is such a collaborative effort. It really requires all three of us. So we always talk about that all three of us have vetted and carefully reviewed, edited really every paragraph of this book. We have all three of us looked at it and given feedback on it. It's not just I don't know how other authors how their process works, but I imagine some authors take one chapter and then the other author does the other chapter. Oh my gosh, we do not do that. We are all three of us deeply involved in every chapter.
So but now we're kind of winding down time, and I did have a question that I was holding, and I wanted to ask you about it, and that is, I personally, in my psychology courses at a community college, one of the skills that I want to give to students is, like, I want them to be able to take science and to be able to communicate it to others. Now, it's at a different level than maybe what you were trying to do in journalism, but can you just talk about, like, from the student side of things, like, why is it important that students have the skill to do, what you do at an entry level?
I feel like everybody is capable of understanding science, and everybody is smart enough to understand science. And it's the burden is on the person explaining it, not the person listening. If you can't explain it clearly, if you can't make a sixth grader understand, that's your kind of like your fault. I mean, if they're trying and you can't make them understand it, then it's not like you're a failure, but like you need to find another way to do it. So I think we all need to learn how to communicate in a way that that registers with others. So I think that in a pedagogical situation, it's the onus is on the author to make it understandable and clear to everybody. Obviously you can't, in a real world, it's not going to work. The way you explain something will not work for every single person, but you really are aiming for that, to make it so anybody can understand. Like a kid could pick it up and read it and it would make sense, because science should not be shrouded in scary words and, I don't know, like overly, what's the word? Why I'm not thinking
jargon?
of jargon and just like too many words and too much. I feel like a lot of people like to hide behind that and keep their knowledge somehow separated from not teachers, but people.
Isn't that interesting? Like researchers and academics, they want to get their ideas out there, but then they write them sometimes in such a way that the ideas are not going to be sticky, because so you have to ask, like, what's it all for? And maybe that's the way the academy has trained people to do things, right? And maybe we're moving into a new era, and I really do feel like we are now. My world is really quite narrow, right, in psychology, but I hope we're trending in that way. But I still have students who go to primary source materials, and they're like looking for things, and they hold it up to me and they go, I can't understand this. And I look at it and I go, oh yeah, I can't understand this either. Right.
Yes.
So I don't know. Do you still come across things that you're like, gosh, I wish this person would take a class in science communication?
Yes, I do. I find, like, a lot of reading that I do, I feel like I don't understand this, and I don't want to feel stupid because I don't understand this. I want it to be explained to me better. I just, like, a lot of people have had that math teacher in high school, that one math teacher who made it make sense. You're like, oh my God, it actually makes sense. This math isn't that bad. And I think it's a rare ability I'm sure I failed miserably in math, trying to make math relatable, but it's a rare ability to make math relevant and fun for students. And there are those teachers. I don't know if you've had one, but they're unforgettable. Mine
was an English teacher named Rick Clark, and he wasn't the nicest person, I got to tell you, but he opened up my eyes to how to write, that I could write. I did not get a good grade in his course, but he inspired me, and something stuck with me. So what is that? I don't even know what that is.
I don't know. Also, your question about why should students learn how to communicate in a way, I do think that communication is so incredibly important for our society to be living in harmony. I mean, people are we live, like I mentioned before, and like people talk about all the time, we live in a very polarized society right now. And we have to be able to communicate with each other and make each other understand different points of view. So otherwise, we can't do anything. We can't accomplish anything without clear communication.
Yeah. Well, I'm entertaining right now asking you another series of questions, but I think it's going to be too off topic because I was going to ask for your professional opinion as a journalist as to what's going on kind of in our like news cycle right now. But I think maybe
where you should, a good place to read I look at the Columbia Journalism Review. That's like one of the best sources for understanding what's going on in journalism.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think generally the shuttering of all these local news sources, these local newsrooms, is probably the biggest threat. And that combined with this social media environment where people just seek information that confirms their pre-existing views. You've probably read about confirmation bias and the illusory truth effect and all these factors, these forces that are making people just get more hardened in their views and anti the other side, or who they perceive as the other side. So the death of local news and then the echo chambers of the internet it's a bad combination. And journalism is not, I don't think journalism is facing challenges now, I believe.
Yeah, there is a weird parallel between that and, even what we do as psychological scientists of making sure that bias stays out of the science as much as possible, right? And I just found this group. I don't know if have you heard of Tangle?
No.
This group, it's a nonpartisan political news organization. They have a website, and they just launched, I think, not too long ago. They have a website. And their tagline is "News from all sides," and so it's just like when you're looking for something neutral, you just don't know, always what you are listening to or taking in, or am I in an echo chamber right now? And so I found this to be refreshing. So folks can check that out if they want. But
what's it called again?
It's called Tangle, Tangle. Okay. I like the podcast. And it's really fair. It's refreshing because it's just not partisan. So that's really nice. I just wish people would talk more. Yeah.
Talk to people who have very different views. You can still communicate with people, even if you find their views abhorrent. You can still communicate, and you can still make progress by maybe you can find some piece of common ground.
That's right.
You both value this, or we just got to keep communicating. So.
Yeah. And we all need to learn how to communicate more clearly. It's a beautiful skill that we can give to our students. And we can model it for them. And then we have people like you who are professionals at this, who can also teach us and embed it even into a textbook. So, Coco, I am going to wrap it up there. I know that our time is almost up. And so I just want to say it's been really nice to chat with you. I want to wish you all the best on this new edition of your textbook. And I know that folks are going to really like hearing from somebody who's just not a, boring teacher of psychology. So anyway, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, Garth here. Thanks for listening to Psych Sessions. If you could go to wherever you listen to our podcast and you would follow that podcast or like it, it really does help us as we are trying to get out to more teachers of psychology. Also, if you haven't checked out our website, please visit psychsessions.org and sign up for our monthly newsletter. We offer free resources and valuable news that you are going to want to know related to the teaching of psychology. Thanks.